Well, welcome to week 6 of INET3011W, Social Impact of IT. This week's subject is talking about working in teams. So thinking more about moving from the individual contribution to what it means to really work together in a professional setting. And teams can be defined in many ways. I think with standard corporate thought of, what we traditionally think of as, going to work and working in your team, usually people kind of stick within their business unit. They might have weekly meetings, they might have staff meetings, they might have projects that people are working on. But that's, hopefully a very small percent of what you're doing. You should be thinking about, okay, well, what does it mean to work in a team that might have various groups or business units all tied together, and maybe people from outside the organization as well. A lot of people hire outside, whether they're consultants or firms to kind of help align things and get things done. Teams are not always just stuck to internal, nor only to a business unit. So a couple ways to think about this. We talk a lot about Agile because I think Agile is a methodology that was spawned out of manufacturing, and then software development kind of grabbed it, and it's kind of the basis of what we do in most shops today. It's not it doesn't fit everything perfectly, but the idea of Agile, DevOps, CI/CD kind of methodologies really does get to a different mode of thinking about things, and I think it's a little more in line with efficiencies and really getting things done in a fast and effective manner. I would see it that years and years ago, I would watch these projects that people would define, and they'd go into Microsoft Project and they'd build Gantt charts and dependencies and all these things, and they'd try to paint this picture out for 12 months on what they anticipated was going to come and what people were going to do. Lo and behold, things change, right? And what happens, between now and 12 months from now is quite a gamble. Now, I think if you go back in history and you look at, back in the industrial age and when we were, just starting to do manufacturing, things did take a while and you did have to have a pretty good blueprint. But today's world, I think things change too much. That's not to say, though, that there are things that are, if they're well known and there's very little risk that anything's going to change, then it makes sense. Go, do the waterfall methodology. But the Agile is a mode that allows you to kind of pivot and change as you go. And so when you think of the teams that define Agile, and I'll take it outside of development. It doesn't have to be in development. It really has to be anything that knows that there is a goal. The goal might be a little soft or loose, in terms of exactly what it's going to look like. But usually there's a financial goal. There's a that's pretty well defined. There's a kind of a output, whether it's feature function or whether it's how that methodology is going to apply to something down the road. Usually there's something like that, but then, this idea of taking, 2-week sprints and evaluating and kind of, moving back and forth is kind of key, but there needs to be different people in the team. There needs to be, a leader, like a scrum master that's the one that kind of orchestrates it all and, keeps things moving. They have a much larger runway of view of what's going on versus, somebody who's doing those 2-week sprints. And it's not that you're trying to keep people in the dark. It's just you're trying to get them from concluding things that don't need to be concluded just yet. They just need to be worked and brought out in a certain way. How that breaks down into environments and workspaces is interesting as well. I remember reading, this is probably 10 years ago now, this article about how Google did it, and they had 3 pods of 7 people. And they would go around the sun. So of those 3, they would all get code committed at the end of their shift. And whichever code base had the best or the least errors and the best output was the one that the next shift got. So it was 3 pods of 7 per shift, and there's 3 shifts. So that was their way of building code in a very rapid, fast manner. And there's some logic behind why it's 7 and 3 and, making sense. So, you can imagine 21 developers kind of working in unison, even though the 3 groups were actually developing the same thing. It was just a way to kind of gauge and value the output. Now think about what that meant, though. I mean, there's new metrics that come out of that as well, to say that if one group never wins, is never committed, are they the wrong people? Are they, why is their code never up to snuff and the other 2, seem to always make it work? And, is that something we want to look at over time and say, that doesn't make any sense anymore. We're going to do something different. So many ways to think about that. Automation is all about how do we configure, and we can use fancy terms like infrastructure to software and how people are trying to do it. But really it does come down to how can we write code that fits the exact thing we need to get done, but then always think about it in a, okay, well, what exactly are we trying to do here? And maybe we automate the configuration of it and the automation of some of the code being built, or we use a language that, like React or something that can run on multiple platforms and make that easier. So a whole different way to think about that. And then the difference between a group and a team. A lot of this is in the readings, but, thinking about, a team has a dedicated goal, metrics, and everybody has, total function, where a group might be a little more subjective. It might be the things that, you just want feedback from a group of people. Maybe somebody gives no feedback, and maybe, somebody gives all the feedback. It all depends. So just, definitions and having to think about it differently, because I think there's a lot of teams that are actually groups, because if there's no goal, if there's no focus point, and there's no metrics and data to support it, what's the point? So this week is really discussion on team challenges, and then paper 1 is due. Now keep in mind, paper 2 draft is due next week, so don't sit back and think the writing's over. We've got to keep cranking there and start to work on number 2.